Well, thank you so much for joining today. We have been looking forward to launching this negotiation series for some time, and we've launched various workshops, but this is the first time we're basically taking that one-on-one work, the more immersive, what should you do? How do you invest in these skills? And really walking you through it in a group setting, but in a way that hopefully really allows you to come to the table, be a lot more confident, and really start thinking about this in terms of what should you invest in and what do you want and what can you do from here. So this series is going to be an installment or four installments, and they will be accessible online after. There's going to be accompanying exercises. So I really recommend, if possible, try to follow in real time. So if you can't join something live and you're listening to a recording, totally fine, but try to do the exercises. It's something where if you don't come up with, a hypothetical situation or an ask, how are you going to deeply workshop? So we'll talk about that later when we get to the exercises, but thanks again for being here. So in terms of, what we're going to cover, I'll give a little bit of the agenda and the overview, but first I'll share a little bit about my background, just understanding that, of course, it's good to know who's presenting, what is my background, why am I a subject matter expert? And again, if you have questions, if you want to, drop comments in the chat, you're always welcome to. So I'm the founder of She's Independent. I created the course over many years of negotiating through field work, in technical sales roles. I've also up-leveled my personal salary and compensation package and worked with others to up-level theirs. And we're talking 40+% year-over-year increases. So we're not talking, 10%, but really big increases. I'm also an active angel investor, a board advisor, and I specialize in anything from revenues and go-to-market through to financing. And so the topic of negotiation and asks, it comes up all the time. It's a topic that I love. I've done independent research, but a lot of this has been, learning on the job. The other piece I like to talk about in terms of, the work I do and with She's Independent is the mindset component, the mindset work. It's not just about, finances. It's not just about saying, well, how do we make more money? So much about, I think, what I intended to do with launching She's Independent was bringing up the mindset and the balance and the alignment and really workshopping on, financial and professional development topics, but more than that. How do you ultimately get to a place where you can feel really good about what you're doing, where you are, and also identifying, those growth areas and basically getting to the point of workshopping to feel really good and align with the roles you want. So negotiation, of course, and also professional confidence are really key in terms of investing in your professional journey and your personal journey. And we'll talk about things to get you, hopefully workshopping and starting to eliminate that wage gap that you're really seeing in the office, not only for women, not only for gender, but a gap that's even wider when we're talking about women of color. And this is inclusive. So the workshops, the topics that we do, we're really excited about women identifying, but really promoting diverse audiences and really spreading, I think, some of this content and kind of inspiration so that people can start showing up and feeling really good at where they are. Additional offerings I'll mention, briefly include things like investing, so early stage investing, and we also have an accompanying investment club. We also have a sales boot camp. We offer a mindset series. So it's not just about negotiations, but I'm really pleased that you're here today. And if any of the other things sound interesting that I mentioned, feel free to check it out on the website, shesindependent.com. So for a quick look of what we're going to be covering in this series, and if you've already joined for, a previous workshop with me around negotiations, some of today will be a little bit of a reminder, but it's also going to go deeper. So stay with, don't tune out. And again, ask questions as they come up. We want to make you a subject matter expertise. So in terms of, what we're going to cover today, it's objectives, it's goals, it's basically that framework of, what should you be thinking about? What do you really need? It's also checking in with yourself, understanding where are you today? What do you need to invest in? And then a big topic today that is a really great one, honestly, for so many reasons, it's what's your why? So we'll get into that and then we'll present some exercises. But as I said, if you have a question, you're welcome to speak up or drop something in the chat. If you have the question, I guarantee you somebody else either does or will. All right, so why should we care about, that ability to negotiate? Why, are we talking about confidence? Why is negotiation so top and center or front and center? And why is everyone talking about it? And the thing is, negotiation, it's not just about compensation. It's not just about salary. I know that some individuals that are joining this series are going for a fundraise or, are renegotiating a lease. And there's so many situations in which you want the framework, you want to understand how to articulate what is your ask, how do you present, and how do you basically show up confidently so that you can ask for the thing, whatever that thing may be. And so reminding yourself, right, negotiation is everywhere. It truly is you just choosing to enter into an ask. So if we're talking compensation packages, there's a bunch of levers. Of course, we're all thinking dollars, right? What are you making? What's your base salary? What are the bonuses? Maybe there's a percentage bonus or a bonus on funding or bonus on, some bogey. But basically, it's not just about money. It could be about money, but it could be about, do they have a 401k? Do they have do they cover your healthcare expenses? All of these things, and you could boil it down to money, but ultimately there are things like reporting lines. Maybe you want them to invest in your professional development. Maybe you actually want them to expense, workshops you do that will make you better at work. Ultimately, understanding all those levers, all the different things you can ask for, that's a big part of, what negotiation is and how you can show up and really ask for what you need. So buying a home, leasing a car, walking into a vintage shop and saying, I like that picture, which literally I've done. And it's not even a big negotiation. There's a price tag of $500 and I say, I love that. I'd pay $350. But I know the number, I deliver it confidently, I'm articulate, and they know that I mean business. And guess what? It doesn't even take that long. He sells it at $350. If I go in and I, don't know what I'm doing, it maybe is all drawn out, but it could be as quick as a 5-second conversation. So your last overview slide, because I know it's exciting to get into actually the subject matter, but let's lay out a few goals, because where are we if we don't have those goals? So in terms of your participation, I really want you walking away with more confidence, not only in terms of negotiation skills and confidently articulating or navigating the ask or negotiation, but I also really want you feeling confident about your professional value. So again, applies in so many cases, and you could also replace some of the words. It could be your personal value in XYZ situation. But again, I really want you thinking about how to develop the confidence. How can you learn and invest in understanding, well, what is the value you bring? And again, it may be about dollars, it may be about something else. It may be better aligning with a different role. And then, finally, I want you to feel confident when you are entering a negotiation, whether that's being able to, own the dialogue, representing yourself, asking for something confidently, using the skills and the tips and tricks that we'll share. But basically, there's a lot that I want you to get out of participation in this series. And I would love to hear from you. So feel free to always reply back, let me know what you think and how it's going. So a quick review of that framework. Again, we'll start here and then we'll start diving in a little bit more deeply. Basically, you have to think about the framework and you have to know what goes into the negotiation to really show up and to really get what you want. The cards, as a reminder, are not what wins the poker game. It's all about that player, how they play not only their hand, its odds, but it's also how they're playing the opponents. It's using various strategies to promote the best possible outcome. Posture, how confident are they in their hand, or what do they display? Is there a tell? But again, it's not just about the luck of the draw. And so don't get caught up in that. So let's dive into these topics in a little bit more detail. So mindset and confidence is where I like to start because it's arguably that most important piece. Are you delivering your ask with confidence, and are you holding your ground? Even the cadence of your speech. Does your voice, go up at the end? Or do you really hold firm? And is it a voice where you say, and this is what I need? Not, and this is what I need? Are you asking or are you telling? Are you informed? Are you ready to make a deal? Does your counterpart understand, that you're there to really make a deal? And do they respect you, at least in that moment? Know the dynamics going in, right? That can allow you to be prepared and develop more confidence and ultimately navigate it in a much more thoughtful and articulate manner. So think through that scenario, right? What is the ask? What is the background? And we'll get more into this later on, but basically, can you uncover value in terms of what you're bringing or in terms of the scenario? And so a few examples I like to talk about are if you are in an employer, compensation or ask hiring situation, and if you get the offer, understanding you are in the power position because they want you and they've already invested resources to find you. Know that and let that, come across in the confidence when you ask for what you need. Make sure that if you're with an existing employer and you think you deserve a raise, know the value that you've brought to the employer, and know that there's a ton that they need to spend on recruiting and onboarding and hiring. And so if they lose you, there's this huge amount that they're going to miss out on. Know that as a power dynamic going in, and that should ultimately fuel the confidence. We're going to get more strategic, but I just wanted to kind of remind you of those scenarios. And mindset really is at the center of everything, right? Can you convince and influence? How do you deliver the content and how do you show up? And so that concept of executive presence is something that I cannot speak to enough. That mix of your body language, right? When you walk into that room, are you kind of, and walking into the room, right? It might be virtual, but are you kind of like sitting in the corner and kind of, hiding? Or maybe you're in a big meeting and you're really taking up space and you're looking at the camera. How do you show up? Tone of voice, dress, all of those things. I decided to wear a very comfortable outfit today. And then I threw on a jacket because I said, you know what? We're talking about executive presence. So I'm going to throw on a jacket because it feels good. When I showed up to my first board meeting, and I will say the woman who co-runs the business just dropped a note in the chat. I dressed up because, again, you want to feel good. And sometimes it's about faking it until you do, but making sure that you take the time to really believe the ask, to really understand your value, to be credible and convincing. Investing in your headspace could also mean practicing the crap out of whatever the ask is, so that no matter what happens, even if you're really scared inside, you can show up confidently. Don't try to figure this out the same day or the night before. Give yourself time, right? Make sure you do the work and that you're intentional so that ultimately when you show up, you can execute flawlessly no matter what happens. And even if you're scared, if you practice enough, they're not going to know you're nervous, or you're going to be so flawless with the ask, it doesn't matter that you're nervous. And then I think the final piece is making sure you take that headspace. So last night I did a little bit of yoga into the evening. And that was something that for me, I had a long week. Something happened. I have a contractor coming by, or he will come by soon. And I had this presentation and I was a little stressed out. So choosing to take the space. I didn't have the energy to do the hike, but choosing to go to a quiet space, take a little bit of rest, and then I had a really good night of sleep. So the mindset investment truly is something, that really matters. And by the way, you are welcome to be interactive. So you can drop notes in the chat if there are things you want to suggest. Again, I don't know everything, right? I love the collaborative approach. So if you have thoughts, if you want to drop things in the chat, you are welcome to do so. Next up, information and research. Hugely important. Really, all of these, circles in the Venn diagram are important, but information and research should greatly inform your ask. Because if you don't know the value, if you don't know the ballpark, you can't even enter into a negotiation because you're going to be written off, or they're going to say, that's silly, I don't even want to engage. So do the homework so that you have the understanding of how should you inform and what can you ask for? What is feasible or reasonable? Maybe it's understanding a budget. Maybe it's understanding the job market, the competitor landscape. What are other people getting? Glassdoor, recruiters, there's many places you can dig around for the information, but you have to do your homework. bounce ideas around, talk to people. Don't do this in a silo, right? Because ultimately, whether it's a mentor or a family member, you can get really good insight just by bouncing those ideas around. And you can start getting more comfortable with, is this something that's reasonable? Is this an ask that makes sense? Because I guarantee you, people that love you and trust you, or want what's best for you. Again, mentorship with us, you can ask a number of people. They're going to give you feedback if you ask for it. How does this sound? Do you think I could ask for more? This is what I found out. What do you think about this ask? I love that collective reasoning and insight. I love having my own personal process for diligence and for digging in and for figuring out the math and the data. But I love the collective approach to, and how does this feel, right? How does this sound? Is this reasonable? Is it logical? So ultimately, whether it's understanding your value, the value of the role and what you're bringing, market value of an item that you want to negotiate on, it's all about digging in and understanding value in numbers. So make sure you do this work before you even try to say, and what should I ask for? And then the third piece of the Venn diagram is, of course, the approach. So how do you approach it? What kind of strategy, if any, are you using? What kind of skills are you using? And I love this part, right? How well do you play the game? And so we're going to talk about a bunch of different skills, a bunch of different strategies. Again, if you have questions, please speak up. I'd love to hear it. But basically, I'm leading with silence here. Silence is one that I can tell you all day long that this works, but unless you practice it, it's really hard to master. I'm going to ask you a question and then I'm going to go quiet. I've been thinking about it, and $90,000 just unfortunately is not the value that I'm bringing to the role. I've done the research. I've dug into past projects. I'm not going to go into all the detail. I'm going to need 110,000. Otherwise, I'm sorry, but I just don't think there's going to be alignment. Awkward pauses are your friend. They're super awkward. They're still tough to execute, probably for years. You may never get to the point where it's comfortable, but you learn so much in that silence. Because when I go quiet after I make the ask, what happens? Besides it being very awkward, we're not comfortable with silence. So it forces someone to speak. So if you ask something and you're quiet, you're demonstrating, A, you have the confidence to hold your ground. And then B, they're going to speak first if you really hold your silence. And then you learn something. Even if they don't say, oh, great, I want to give you 110, which they probably won't. They might start to babble because they're nervous. And it might be, thanks for letting us know, budget's tight, but let me think about this, or let me bring this back to the business head. You're going to learn something.
Natalie, I have a question about that.
Yeah, for sure.
So when you say something like that, and basically it seems like you have to be willing to walk. So how would you phrase it?
You don't have to be willing to walk on that one, I don't think.
Oh, really? Because I think
we'll talk about, I love that you're asking that, and willingness to walk, it's huge. And that's absolutely a strategy. And it creates confidence in all the things, having a backup offer. But if you ask a question, you make a statement, you're not saying I'm leaving tomorrow. You're saying, I've done this great work. I've done the research. And unfortunately, I'm not at my market rate. I'm asking formally, to move to 110,000. And you're not saying I'm leaving tomorrow. You're basically just coming to the table saying, I need a raise.
Okay. I think that's where I get in my head about it, because I'm like, well, if they say no, then I look stupid.
By the way, I need to give Bridget a shout out because she's a friend here in Boulder. And she, I know, was a bit nervous over an ask recently, but she executed it. She was nervous about waiting. And by the way, silence works in multiple places. So I have sleep on it on this slide as well. She was nervous and she said, what do I do? And I said, just wait. And then she heard back positively. And sure, there was maybe a little bit of discomfort and still figuring out, alignment with that business, but it's silence in the moment. And it's silence, meaning don't, follow up, don't second guess yourself, sleep on it, don't say, oh no, I haven't heard back yet. Let me apologize and walk back. Put it out there confidently because you've done the work and you know your value, know how you want to articulate it, and then create that space. Right. And the other thing about sleeping on it is, let's just say they immediately came back. And I think in Bridget's case, they basically said, yeah, we'll go up a little bit, but not as much as you want. But don't just say yes, because you want to really see how this feels. You don't want to go into a negotiation, get a little bit of something, and then say, oops, I wish I'd gotten more. So make sure that you're creating that space and that you're being intentional enough so that if and when you do say, great, let's do this, you actually feel good about it. And you hold your, position. If you really need 110, or maybe you need 105, hold your position. And, another point on this slide, which is anchoring, which is by you throwing out the number. I didn't just say, hey, I did the research and it looks like I'm being underpaid. Notice the language. It was, I did the research and 110 is my market rate. Way stronger. I threw out a number. I led with it. I did the research, right? It's the language, it's the positioning. And so if I want to get a little crafty and I think it's 110, I could start with 115 or 120. Right? Because anchoring is this concept that whatever you throw out first, as long as it's ballpark, you can't be so insane because they're not going to play with that. But as long as it's ballpark and something, somewhat realistic, the negotiation pulls to that initial number. And I've said this in other workshops, but if you are on the flip side, and if somebody else throws out a number, and if you hate it, rip up that number and say, you know what, if we're going to negotiate, that number can't even be on the table, because anchoring can work for you or it can work against you. So know what it is. And yes, I love in the chat, Caitlin had said, seems like friends and family are a great place to practice awkward pauses. Yes. Your dog or your cat, they won't really be able to help you probably. But no, just, you can also even do it, you can practice and always role play in a mirror. You can do it over the phone. It's great when you can do it in person. But absolutely, there's so many forums, so many places you can practice. We could even set up a little cohort if you all want to, do some of this stuff live instead of just take home exercises. So we'll talk about that.
I was going to say, along with anchoring, it seems like employers, especially now that Colorado, and maybe other states have to report their salary range. And I noticed that it seems like they anchor super low.
Yeah. It's interesting. So state by state, numbers are sometimes transparent and sometimes not. And what do I mean by that? So you're right. In certain states, the employer may have to advertise or say, hey, this is the amount for the role. That doesn't mean, by the way, they can't go up, right? But what do I mean by maybe a state can't share information? In California, I know, at least when I was there a few years ago, you actually legally could not ask an employee what they made in a prior role. So understanding a bit about whether it's, what happens in your state, but really just using this stuff to your advantage. So if somebody asks you and you're not in California and you're in a state where there's no law preventing this, you could basically reframe the question. You can always reframe the question. You could say, I've done the research, and for the role I'm looking for, this is the competitive amount. This is the market value. And if they really dig into, well, what were you making? I mean, if you want to go down that route, but truly, if you're owning the conversation, you can get that off the table. You don't have to share that kind of thing. It's up to you to own the dialogue. What do you want to share? What do you want to put out there? Because again, it is so relevant for you to say, and this is what I'm looking for. This is what the market value is for the role, and this is what I'm looking for. Way more relevant than what you did, I don't know if it was a different role prior or even a different company. There's everything from funding to when you got hired and the trajectory and bonusing of that company. I mean, truly, what's the market value? That's what I care about when you're negotiating and advocating on behalf of yourself. However, if you were overpaid in a role, sure, you can talk about that. But again, I think ultimately it's, how do you own the dialogue? And, the other point on this slide, which is authority in what you're asking for, authority in how you navigate and handle this. I'll tell you something with salespeople. I want them negotiating. If I'm hiring a salesperson, I want them negotiating. Why? Salespeople negotiate in their role, right? Like, are you in a customer facing role? How are you at handling the interpersonal, those dynamics, representing, communicating? So basically, right, it's another form of interview or another thing that you can interview on. How does somebody execute the ask? Because if you show them professional skills, authority, and things that they didn't understand or know that you had, they may want to elevate you professionally. I don't want you ultimately to get a bump or a raise and then pick up way too much work that wasn't within the scope of your market value. Then you need another raise. But I do want you elevating yourself to demonstrate your competency, the fact that you did your research and your preparation, and the fact that you can execute, right? That all can happen as a part of the negotiation. And again, I know a lot of this is compensation, but there are also in many things we could talk about where it's other deals or sales strategy. So I have up another slide here with other types of negotiations, which maybe are, somewhat applicable to, compensation, but applicable to deals in general. And so chamomile, I'm mispronouncing it, of course. You're launching your business. And if you want to get the best possible outcome, and you want to close that customer or client, momentum, right? Somebody has an inquiry, they're interested then. Close them then. Close them as soon as you can, because momentum wins and kills deals. Also candidates, if you're hiring somebody, let's just pretend that you're the employer. They're going to want to move you and they're going to try to own that cycle and say, hey, it's an expiring offer. We need to hire by so-and-so date, because it's so easy to lose a candidate if you lose the momentum. Same with a sales deal. These concepts on this slide are so helpful for any type of deal. Mirroring, what is that? When you're selling something or, developing rapport and you're going to basically do the ask, there's something about as you show up, you want to be relatable. You want this person on your other side to understand kind of where you're coming from. You want them to, basically say, great, this makes sense to me. What Natalie's saying, what she's asking for, I'm on board for this. And the concept of mirroring is you're basically, whether it's using language or mannerisms, but you're basically, let's say, changing a little bit based on who are you working with, or who are you asking or negotiating with? And so if I am working with somebody in, let's say, another culture, another region of the world, I may change my formalities or my behavior. Let's just say that I know that this meeting is going to be with, a group of deal makers in Asia. I'll be more formal, right? I'm not going to show up in more casual, wear that might be okay for if I'm working for, a specific industry in the US. So knowing your audience and showing up appropriately truly matters. And it really will allow this other party, right, your counterpart, to say, they understand. I understand them. It's this concept, mirroring. The give-get, another phenomenal one, and it could be applicable with compensation, but it's applicable in so many negotiations, but it's don't just give things up. So let's just say that you ask for something, or somebody says to you, you know what, I can't go with 110, but I can go with 100. If I'm going to give something up, I want to get something in return. Okay, I'm open to 100, but I will need you to pay for my healthcare. And I'm not saying that necessarily is the trade-off, but the point is, don't just give things up. Ask for something in return. And through understanding those levers and different inputs, you can ultimately narrow in and find something that will align. If you're, getting creative, which is a great part of deal making. Can you be creative? And then, I think owning the timeline is similar in ways to the momentum, but a little bit different, which is, do you know how to close this thing, whatever it is? You're going to get better with experience, but if not, just plan the crap out of it so that you know how to move to the next stage. And again, it could be about you asking for something for comp. It could be about you trying to close a sales deal, but just own that deal cycle. know the deal cycle, right? You can't own it if you don't know it. And even if it's the theoretical, I think this is what it is, try to own that and see if it works. But basically you need ownership, and that's how you drive the deals to close. So again, I have a new business. I think this is where I'm going to price something. Own it. Try things, be creative, but own it and drive to close. Don't just put numbers out there and then see what happens. Follow up, chase, learn, right? Own it. And, this concept of working through no is one that I really love. And again, I've covered this in the shorter workshops, but don't be scared of no. Learn from it. And I'm not going to go into all the details on it, but just ask the questions, peel back the layers. No, how do I get that to yes? No is not bad. It's growing through, it's evolving, it's learning so that you can ultimately, hopefully get it to a yes. Or learning so that the next time you ask something, right, you're going to have that information. Let's just pretend that it's really not going to work with this employer. What if in your current negotiation, because you've already chose to leave this employer, you just want to learn through no, and you want to have better comfort with, well, what happens when I ask for something and they're not going to do it? Truly, you could just use it as a learning experience. What can you learn, right? There's so much growth opportunity through that area of whether you want to call it failure or no or pushback. And so it's a really tough one a lot of times for especially women identifying, but it's such a good one. And yes, Bridget, I love that. I have said, if you're not hearing no, if you don't experience pushback, you're leaving something on the table or you're not asking for enough. And I don't want you to be somebody that shows up and asks for so much that the other party says, I don't even want to, think about this. This person's annoying. This person doesn't value, so when you're asking, when you go into a negotiation with an employer, for example, I'm big on know what you're asking for, but also remind them why they want to work with you. Reinforce, I love the culture here. I love the team. I love what we're building, but I'm going to need more because I did the research and the market rate is different. But you want to make sure that you're not being just combative to be combative. But yes, Bridget, you're absolutely right. If you never experience pushback, what does that mean? Are you a yes person? Are you just kind of playing in that really safe area? And I love, and I guess maybe just because I'm kind of odd in this respect, but I like to know, wow, I experienced some pushback, so that was a boundary, or that was, that's where I can go to. Because if you're never feeling that, if you're winning all your deals, the thing is more valuable, or you are more valuable, right? So a really good concept. And now we're going to transition to something that I don't really talk about, or I really just kind of gloss over, but it's the why. And we're going to, dive more into things like superpowers and alignment next time, but we're going to spend a good amount of time right now on the why. Because when you uncover your why, it changes everything. Truly, if you show up and you know your why, and you're aligning it with your role and all the things, and you know the value or what you're going for, and you know the why behind it, like nothing can stop you. And so I'm sharing a little bit about my historical why. Wall Street, young woman, I wrote an article about it on our blog, like, hashtag Me Too before it existed, and just, so many not fun experiences. And even before that, it was, oh, Natalie, like, are you looking for a husband? Why are you here? And that really, gave me this determination and grit to say, oh, I'm going to show them, because I have this, I have this fire in me, and I'm going to make this happen. But it wasn't just that. I also felt underpaid, or not just felt, I knew I was underpaid, right? When I did the research, but I didn't feel valued. And that really doesn't feel good. And by the way, most people, they're not leaving the job because of money. They're leaving because of culture or a bad manager. Let me repeat that. Most people are not leaving a job because of money and compensation. It's because of a bad manager or the culture. We're not feeling valued, basically. And so really, important things to dig into. The struggle for seniority was something that, for years I was performing and I was exceptional. And, it was, oh, great, we'll pay you more, we'll pay you more. But like, they weren't giving me that VP role for years because I hadn't already done it or because I didn't look like, somebody else. And that drove me to work harder. And that gave me a why that was so powerful, where I basically became unstoppable and got to a point where now my why has evolved, but it's so powerful. And, when I invest in She's Independent, I invest in this programming and what I do, I'm now getting, these tremendous roles and opportunities, and people are knocking on my door and saying, hey, can you run this business? Will you be our advisor? Will you be on our board? It's incredible. You launched this investment club, will you get involved in X, Y, and Z? And my why today is, I would say, even more powerful, but it's kind of evolved from the why I used to have, which when I dig into it, the reason I started She's Independent initially was I'd lost my mom to suicide, and I care tremendously in mindset and mental health. And I care about showing up as a woman, feeling like I can make decisions. I can own these things and I can feel good. And society may, judge women as they grow older, but I'm going to have a handle on my finances, and I won't have to report to or, find a partner to do X, Y, and Z, because I show up for myself and I invest in these things. I used to be inspired by others, and I want to inspire others. Something that drove me for years, on Wall Street was you'd hear a woman who was more senior, more seasoned, maybe, 10, 15 years older, and she would speak, or 20 years older, and she would share something about passion, about, what she'd done. And that was just so inspiring to me. And so again, like, I'm excited to give back. And, I speak to university groups and student groups a lot of times, without any money there, because I care about it. Fulfilling mission, of course, I think it goes without saying. And then, the last point on the slide is, thank you so much for dropping that in the chat. The last point in the slide is, spending the time to say, in what serves me, how can I be balanced and have boundaries? And, what ultimately will lead me to this kind of place of fulfillment or health and mindset, that feels really good. And so again, my why in a few pictures, and it's kind of fun. And I guess, it's a mix of things, but I still speak up to this day when I see things that don't feel good. When a company that I was very early at posted something on their LinkedIn, and it was, girls in bathing suits, I said something and they pulled it down. I said something publicly and they pulled it down and they apologized. By the way, that company got acquired. I've made money off of them. But what I feel better about than the money I made is standing up for myself and for other women. I've workshopped feeling good about money, and not just feeling like, hey, money is this negative, or money, is going to drive my life. I left Wall Street and I knew I was going to make less, but that's because when I dug into my values, I care about money and financials, but I care more about the alignment. But I still love the money, and I still love workshopping and doing things that pay me. Getting outside, investing in headspace and mindset. Just some images, to kind of get you thinking. And so I really want you thinking, and this will be an exercise that I'll state later, but what is your why? What do you need? Is it truly the money, or is it the respect? Is it the seniority? What really drives you? And Simon Sinek has a really great, I think it's like a less than 20-minute clip on what is your why. And it talks about, and you can, I highly recommend, you listen to it, and I'll send a link later, but it's basically, people aren't buying from companies because of a feature or because of a logo. It's, how does the company make them feel? And so that's a little bit more in the context of the professional, how companies show up, but thinking about what is your why, that ultimately is why people like you, why people want to work with you, why they want to hire you, why they want to do a deal with you. And you may, by digging in and doing the exercise of what is your why, you may say, wow, I'm in the wrong role. And again, we'll workshop superpowers. We'll talk about that next time, but digging into your why is a huge part of, and what's your ask? Because if you don't do that work and you end up somewhere and you haven't, set the goals and you haven't figured it out, are you going to be happy? Probably not. And so a few tips or reminders, some of which we covered and some of it's a little bit new, but it's aiming intentionally. It's knowing really, what do you need and what do you want? And again, that partially comes, numbers come when you do the research, but you can start crafting this and you can start thinking through it. To aim intentionally, right? Where do you want to go? I can't tell you that, but you can do the work, because ultimately I can ask you questions, but it's really about you taking that time and space and uncovering and then really owning that why. And then a huge part is also saying, well, what am I not good at, right? Because if I walk through this and I say, hey, these are all the things you need, you could probably rank them and already probably have an idea of, I'm pretty good with executive presence, but I'm really crap at talking through numbers and articulating, value with data. Great. Know what you need to work on, because you're going to want to spend more time on that, because we want you to be, good across the board at all of these things. So we're getting to the close of today. The exercises that I want you to work on before the next session together are, know what scenario you want to workshop, whether it's a hypothetical. So maybe you want to enter into and you want to do a negotiation, with your current employer or with a new job. Pick it and define it. It could be you sold a business and you didn't like ultimately how the sale happened. I've workshopped with people to say, and what could we have done better? And guess what? You have a lot of data in that case. So pick a situation. Don't just say, I want to get better at negotiating. And that's great if you do, but let's pick a situation so that you can actually workshop and ultimately find the numbers, do the digging, confidently articulate, role play all the things for your situation. Second part, what are you looking for? So I want you to be intentional. I want you to know, what are you aiming for? So what are your goals? And again, it could be that you're starting to determine, because you don't know ultimately what the ask is, and that's okay, but what are your goals? What do you want to get out of this? And it could be finding a role that's a fit. It could be nothing to do with money. It could be, finding a role based on understanding confidently, this is what I'm good at. These are my superpowers. This is alignment for me. And I think, part 3 really kind of wraps into that, which is, again, digging in and understanding what is your why. So that's what I had prepared for today. Next up will be, workshopping and talking a bit more about the superpowers, understanding your value and alignment. And I know that it's been a little quiet, but I will stop the screen share and I open it up. If anyone has questions, no problem if not, but so appreciate you joining today and, what I heard over the chat.
Hi, could I ask
Hello.
a quick question, Natalie?
Absolutely.
Thank you. You're so awesome. I feel like the content you present is just so invaluable and things that we aren't really taught very much about. I guess my question comes into the information piece. If you find information just in conversation and the like, and then you know that it was only for specific people who, let's say, got a 401k match and that's not necessarily publicized, how would you go about presenting that information without it being, like this person told me or any kind of.
Absolutely. I mean, you can always choose your words. So let's just pretend that somebody did tell you. You can say, I've done the research and this is what's expected. Or you can use even prior employer information that you've gathered, right? So as an example, if I'm working with an employer and they have a 401k and the next one doesn't, you can come up with the value of, and what are you missing? But I'm a big fan of having the conversation. And so I've always had it, depending on the company, but I've had conversations openly with others to understand and uncover numbers. I'm a fan of, ask the questions, have the conversation, even when it's uncomfortable. And if you don't get along with somebody, I would not be like, hey, tell me what you make, right? But maybe you're friendly, maybe you're open to, or you're saying, hey, I was just digging into, or I got some offer away and I'm just curious, would you be open to sharing, depending on what your level of comfort is. But again, there's ways you can navigate this externally outside of your workplace. So again, recruiters are great because you can ask all the things, but I'm a huge fan of thinking about the total package. So not just, the dollars, but okay, what benefits do you get? And what's time off? And is there equity? And how do you think about equity? So I'm a big fan of just having the dialogue and asking the questions and digging, if you can, within the workplace and externally.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And by the way, if you don't ask, you're never going to learn, right? could you have gotten more? And I'm not saying to be totally egregious and ask for everything, but ask the questions. When you're talking to the employer, when you're putting something out there, do you have room to negotiate on? And you could ask a number of things before you get too crazy with your ask. Figure out what are they, open to.
I have a question about the value, or the point you made about values, or
Yeah.
do you feel valued? So when I was negotiating with my current job against a backup offer, that was a question that the manager asked me. She asked if I feel valued, and I basically was pushing for a raise, and so I didn't feel valued in the monetary response, but I felt valued otherwise, but I kind of didn't know how to respond to that question.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any thoughts on
No,
that.
it's a great point. And I think maybe you missed something there, and maybe you felt bad about it. And it's now you're kind of thinking through, maybe you could have articulated or better said, I appreciate the team and, the culture and the opportunity, but monetarily, I don't feel valued. Or, you can be specific there. And it's interesting because if she asks that, or she or the person asked that, I think you want to be careful, right? Because again, you want to come across where you're not over asking or feeling like you're not appropriately thanking them or communicating. If you really enjoy the working environment, let them know. Because again, you don't want to just be like, hey, this person's just always going to ask for more money, and like they're not appreciative of culture or support or these other things. So if it's really just about the money, let them know. I love all these things, but I've done the research and, I'm getting offers away. And unfortunately, you're just not at my market rate.
Right.
But I love everything else. So I really want to make this work, reinforce why they want you.
Okay. I think I froze a little bit, but I hopefully conveyed some of that. So,
yeah. And you can follow up, right? You got the raise, and I was reflecting on it, first, thank you so much. But I was reflecting on it. And one of the questions I don't think I addressed well, which was, you asked if I felt valued. And I want you to know, I do feel valued in terms of it being a team player. It was really about the finances, but I want you to know, I'm so appreciative of, the opportunity and, the fact that you all adjusted my pay. You can still do that, right? It's not giving something up, right? The negotiation, I think, is over for you. But that could further reinforce you are aligned with them.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. And I guess another thing was, it came up earlier and I didn't call it out, and we'll talk about it, later on, but having a backup offer or having a plan for, and what if this doesn't go my way, that both gives you confidence. It gives you pathing for, and what if. So later we're going to kind of map out, a hypothetical, scenario. But again, doing the work could be finding the backup offers or finding, something else that works if you can't get the thing. Whether it's job, house, I had 7 offers when I was buying my home, and they weren't all, offers at that one time, but over a 2-month period, I made 7 offers, and I negotiated on some of them on price. I negotiated on, various attributes or things, levers, like, what was I going to do based on the inspection, or what was the earnest money? It's okay if you don't understand this, but the point is, I wasn't working with one house that I fell in love with and I needed, and I was going to make happen and overpay. And I found something ultimately that was a really good price point, and there's really good value there. So it's because I was open. I was doing the market research. I kept looking. And I'm not saying that that's normal, but Colorado does have a tough market. But again, I wouldn't have found the thing, and I wouldn't have gotten good value if I went with the first one or the second one or the third. So. Great. And no problem if there's no more questions. So appreciate, everyone diving in the engagement, and I'm really excited to continue the series. So with that, I think we'll call it for today. I will send a recording shortly. So if you join late, or if you weren't able to join live, you'll listen in.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Bye. Thank you.